All right, guys, here it is, the Vietnam War. So this is the beginning of LBJ Part 3. There is going to be a ton of stuff to cover, so I want you to make sure you grab your notes and you get started with me and pay attention to everything I say, okay? This is going to be a monstrosity of a war, and I'm going to take care of it in 2 little video segments, so you better pay attention to everything I say. It could all pop up. All right, the war in Southeast Asia. We've been talking about Vietnam. In fact, we've talked about it a little bit already. We've talked about the fact that it was split at the 17th parallel. Communist leader Ho Chi Minh in the north, non-communist leader in the south. Of course, we talked a little bit about JFK's involvement in South Vietnam, sending quote-unquote advisors to South Vietnam and the overthrow of Diem and his government. We are now at a place where we need to start the Vietnam War. The war in Southeast Asia, or we are going to call this the domino theory war, if you will. Remember our goal of the Cold War, to contain communism and not allow it to spread. We must contain it economically, militarily, and diplomatically. If it does not get contained, one country falls, they all fall. Remember, that's how we get the domino theory. One falls, they all fall. Now, the first thing we need to look at, and I know you guys don't have this slide, but I really want you to make a note of it out beside it. The reason Johnson sends ground forces is because he is a Democrat, and the last Democrat to deal with Vietnam, or to deal with the Cold War, is going to have lost China to communism. If you take a look at this map right here, what's the biggest hunk of red we lost? China. It was lost in 1949 by President Truman, a Democrat. So when Johnson comes into office, he says, I'm not going to be the president who sees Southeast Asia go the way China went. And think about him in his Texas accent saying that. This is where we get the Vietnam War. Now, this is your very first slide. This is a massively important slide. Pause it and get it down, please. Okay, so again, we've seen Vietnam be split at the 17th parallel. There it is right there if you take a real close look. The demarcation line of 1954. We've seen the North Vietnamese fall to communism under Ho Chi Minh, and the South Vietnamese, actually, the coup d'etat against Diem, but now the United States is going to start to actively help them combat communism from spreading from the north to the south. Not just advisors anymore. Johnson's going to go full out war. Now, one thing I want to make sure we get here is it says Johnson sends ground forces. Let's make sure. I do believe the one thing you are not needing to write is it says Gulf of Tonkin incident. I need you to make sure you circle. It was in August of 1964. North Vietnamese gunboats attacked 2 U.S. destroyers that were in the Gulf of Tonkin. If you take a very close look at this map up here, the Gulf of Tonkin is off to the side of North Vietnam. We had basically taken and put in battleships out there, okay? With that, they are to monitor North Vietnam, but what ends up happening is little itty bitty North Vietnamese gunboats come up to our 2 destroyers, and they fire upon the destroyers. Now, do you really think 2 gunboats could take out a destroyer? No. But does that give us an excuse to send in troops? Yes. It's what we call an act of war. So Johnson in 1964 asked for what he calls, and this is what you wrote down, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. This is a law. We will refer to it as a blank check. You want to know why a blank check is so great? If somebody says, oh, hey, here you go, Stacey Barnes, here's a blank check. It's because I can write it out for whatever I want. $1 million or $1. And of course, what am I going to write it out for? $1 million. The Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, or the blank check that would be passed by Congress in 1964, enables Johnson to do whatever he wants in Vietnam. It commits the U.S. to fighting in Vietnam, and look at the wording, to take all necessary steps to repel an armed attack against the U.S. forces, including force to assist South Vietnam and any member of, remember SEATO there, NATO, but Southeast Asia. So Johnson, along with his Secretary of State, Robert S. McNamara, that would be a good quiz question right there. Robert S. McNamara will basically be his right-hand man on Vietnam. Takes from 1961, that's going to be JFK time period. You see the number kind of go up there in 1963. A little bit of advisors, remember, that JFK sent, but not really troops. To 1964, look at this middle chart here. It'll tell the entire story. That's the very first year of LBJ. From 1964, you go, bam, 200,000. Bam, 200 and something thousand, 300,000. More in 1967 to almost in 1968, more than 500,000 troops in South Vietnam. This is the Vietnam War. However, the interesting thing is the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution was not a formal declaration of war. Now, let's talk about the years of escalation. Massive highlight right here, 65 to 68. This is when we put the pedal to the metal. A lot of the times I refer to that Gulf of Tonkin Resolution as a blank check, but I also sometimes refer to it as when Johnson stepped on the gas. The Gulf of Tonkin incident allows him to wage that war in Vietnam. The escalation included, I want to make sure you get this right here, Operation Rolling Thunder. Highlight, circle that. That's going to be your Air Force regiment. Use of Agent Orange. I need you to highlight that. That's going to be a napalm kind of thing we're going to drop on a lot of areas in Vietnam. It's going to cause a lot of problems because men are going to inhale Agent Orange, and it's also going to cause birth defects and things like that for the people who do inhale it. Also, the use of ground troops to search and destroy for missions. This Vietnam War map right here is actually a really good map to look at. So if you take a second to look at it, you have the Gulf of Tonkin incident in the Gulf of Tonkin, obviously. Okay, then you have the first sustained bombing of North Vietnam. By 1966, you have air raids or Operation, I love the name of that, Rolling Thunder. Then you have the use of Agent Orange. You have the Tet Offensive. We're about to get there. The My Lai Massacre. You right here have literally the entire Vietnam War in a timeline. So that would be something good to know. Now the ground war. Okay, let's take a look at the ground war. Oops, here. Okay, 1965 to 1968. There is no territorial goals. And here's the deal. You want to know your number one sign something's not going to go well? You don't have any goals. Vietnam was us fighting to stop communism. We didn't know what that looked like. We had no idea what territory we had to get to stop communism. So we were fighting blindly. And we are fighting people called the Viet Cong. Who is the enemy? The Viet Cong. They were farmers by day, guerrillas by night. Very patient people willing to accept many casualties. The U.S. grossly underestimated their resolve and their resourcefulness. Look at this quote right here. You want to know who we're fighting in the Vietnam War? A guerrilla wins if he does not lose. A conventional army loses if it does not win. Mao Zedong said it perfectly. And this, I want you to make sure you get this down. This is going to be, out beside, the very first living room war. Circle that. What do I mean by that? Look at this picture right here. ABC in the field, body counts every single night on television, and the American people don't really know what our goal is in Vietnam. And their brothers are dying. Their fathers are dying. Their husbands are dying. And the Viet Cong is patient. They do not mind dying. And with that, the Vietnam War will become almost impossible to win, especially with the role of the media. Now, you guys don't have to write anything, and we're going to talk about this in class, so I'm not really going to get into this too much in detail on this video. But I do need you to highlight or circle some things. Most significant statement comes from the most trusted man in America, Walter Cronkite. Circle that name. This is the guy who basically told America that JFK had been assassinated and broke down in the middle of a television newscast. America trusts him. He is in their living room every night telling them the news. And in a CBS special, he says, to say that we are closer to victory today is to believe that in the face of evidence, the optimists who have been wrong in the past, to say that we are more mired in a bloody stalemate. I want you to circle that. Bloody stalemate seems to be the only realistic yet unsatisfactory conclusion. What he just said, you can't win this war. And when he says that on TV and millions of Americans hear it and they trust him, Johnson says, if I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America. How important is the media? Unbelievably important. And every single night, you're having that happen. Now, I did tell you, remember we talked about the ground war just now? Let's go ahead and talk about the air war, Operation Rolling Thunder, the sustained bombing of North Vietnam, and we're going to already start talking about Cambodia and Laos as well, the two neighboring countries. In 1966 to 68, you have ongoing bombing of Hanoi for 3 straight years. Now, Hanoi is, I want you to circle Hanoi right here, that is your North Vietnam capital. You especially have targets on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and we're going to go ahead and see a map in just a second. It's going to be the supply trail from the south to the North Vietnamese. Now, you're also going to have many POWs in this war. I need you to star this. Massively important. And again, we're going to see something we should be pretty familiar with, napalm. Okay, napalm is going to be jellied, what was it? What do you remember? Jellied gasoline. You use it in jungle-type areas to burn down the jungle, if you will, the trees and the canopy of the jungle. And napalm is going to be extremely horrendous if there's any civilians in the area.
Napalm in the morning. Smell! You know that gasoline smell? It smells like victory.
That was one of the broadcasts that went out. Napalm smells like victory. Unfortunately, when you have a living room war, this picture accompanied it. This is called Napalm Girl. This is a picture taken by a photojournalist that, I'm going to be honest, it makes you see the horrors of war. There's another unbelievably moving picture as well, and it's a soldier, and it literally, beautiful eyes, this soldier in Vietnam. And the helmet says one thing: war is hell. It is hell. Napalm, war is hell. And when you have this war fought on TV every single night, there is going to be massive problems when bad news reports are sent back to the United States. Okay, let's go ahead and do this one last thing on this video, and then we're going to start the next one. The Tet Offensive. Tet Offensive, I want to make sure you circle that. January 1968. Here is the last year of escalation. Let me tell you, the Tet Offensive is going to be sold to the American people as a failure by the media, when in actuality it was a victory. But unfortunately, the American people didn't listen to anything but the first news report, which was inaccurate. Ironic that the media would get something wrong. This is where it starts to happen. North Vietnamese army and the Viet Cong, remember the bad guys, the guerrillas, attacked the south simultaneously. What happened is you had a Ho Chi Minh Trail down this way. Remember, I was talking about that earlier. It goes into Laos and Cambodia, and basically they come in and they coordinate, and I want you to underline simultaneously, 67,000 attacks on 100 cities and the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. Now remember I said Hanoi was the capital of North Vietnam? Saigon is the capital of South Vietnam. They take every single major southern city for at least a couple hours, but the U.S. and the other SEATO basic forces beat back the offensive, but it doesn't matter. The media had already reported the Tet Offensive as taking over South Vietnam. So everybody watching TV in America after the Tet Offensive on January 1968, they think that we have lost the Vietnam War. They see it as a defeat because that's the way the media had projected it. Shows how important accurate journalism is. Don't believe everything you see on TV. But I will tell you, this is when Cronkite says, we can't win this war. And when all of America is seeing this and their taxes are going up, their brothers, their husbands, their fathers are being sent off to war. We're sending body counts every single night back to the United States. We're having funerals. Can you see how the support for this war will erode? I think so. Domestic reaction to the Tet Offensive. With the portrayal of the Tet Offensive as a failure, disbelief, anger, and distrust of Johnson administration becomes extremely rampant in the United States. Look at this picture right here. See a better picture in class. It's a little bit foggy there. But Johnson is beside himself. He is trying to lead us to victory. He doesn't want to see South Vietnam be that domino to where Cambodia and Laos will fall next. And there literally becomes a chant that everyone has heard if they are in the 60s. And it's, hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? Shows you that even though his great society has made unbelievable improvements in many people's lives, even though his civil rights legislation will achieve the dream that Martin Luther King Jr. had one day, even though he's done all of that, what is he remembered for? The Vietnam War. Hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? Media is powerful.